Oh, this game's gonna eat up so much of my life. Hades 2, at time of recording, currently in early access on Steam. So it is not released finished as a full product as yet. That having been said, I sunk almost 300 hours into the original Hades, and I have now sunk about 40 hours into Hades 2. Have I seen everything it has to offer? No, no, I have not. Have I seen enough that I feel like it's something I'm able to talk about, broadly speaking? Yeah, I think so. So a couple of things. First of all, I will try to avoid anything spoilery. I know some people are going into this game, wanting to experience it for themselves. But broadly speaking, first of all, if you enjoy the first game, you will like this because it's more of it. That having been said, that's also something you have to be a little bit careful of describing a sequel that way, especially in video games, because it's just like, oh, so if it's just more of the same, could it have just been, DLC, an expansion pack or something? Like, no, like it is more of it. It is undeniably the same core gameplay, but the tweaks that have been made to the way that it plays are significant enough to warrant it being a sequel. Significant enough to be like, whole new game. What's it? No, but it's not even like, so like to compare to another isometric game, it's not even like a Diablo thing where like Diablo 1 was addictive, then you play Diablo 2 and there's all these quality of life changes that make it so it's really hard to go back to Diablo 1. It's not that. It's a shift in emphasis. Because whereas the first game, at least as I experienced playing it, the main focus was on the weapons, mastering the way the weapons worked, their power hits and stuff like that. What I'm finding in this second one, big emphasis on magic. And whereas before you just kind of had, a couple of hits of, something eventually as you did a run, you would get enhanced by a boon from some god. The magic is actually really, really core to this. I would say it's, depending on the build you make, magic could potentially be a much bigger deal than the weapon you're carrying. But I would say on most of my runs as far in the game as I am, I'm like, it's about a 50-50 split for for which is getting more play and which kind of feels more important. It's a shift in emphasis on mechanics that were present to some degree in the previous game, but they're getting a lot more focus and have been gone into it in a lot more depth. I've seen some people describe the game kind of basically having two Hades ones within it as it exists now, a not yet finished complete game. And I'd say that's roughly accurate. And without getting into details of like what's going on, I have beaten one of those two Hades ones that are currently inside of Hades 2. There's a I think it's actually a mid boss, but there's a mid boss that's kicking my butt right now on one of these, but I'll deal with it. I'll get through it eventually. But I have beaten sort of what is set up as the initial final boss at least once. But of course, it being Hades, this is a roguelite. So you are meant to die. You are meant to start a new run. You gather some resources. You unlock some stuff. You get new aspects of weapons, new things to add to it, ways to augment the challenge as you go, and get to experience it differently every time. And even as you do that, there is story accounting for it. There are characters who are aware that you keep going back and will still have new things to say about it. Again, because it's a little spoilery, I'm not going to name any names right now, but there is a fairly significant presence of Greek mythological figures who were not in the first one. They go for, obscure feels like the wrong words, but I'd say like the first game covered most, not quite all, but most of the, I guess, mainstream Greek gods, if that phrasing makes sense. Most of the ones most people would know. This one's getting a little bit more into the weeds with some that people might hear the name and go, "Oh, okay," and then there's some that are like, "Wait, who?" But if you like Greek mythology, which I do, you'll recognize these names and go like, "Oh, right, that one wasn't in the previous game. Interesting." So there's that. There is the return of a decent number of characters, not all of them, although some of them are set up. It looks like they may appear later on, either in the narrative as is or in later additions to the game as it gets nearer to its full release. As far as its early access status, you wouldn't know, really, in too many ways. There's really only a handful of things, and it's mostly visual. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of things where it's very clear that the art being used is not the final render. So, like, there's a couple of characters who the portrait image, like when you get into dialogue with them, I mean, it's in the same style, it's all correct, but it's not as finalized, it's not as polished yet. And there's actually a couple who either their portrait image or their in-game avatar is just shrouded in a cloak, like generically, and you don't see a face. There's one of the characters that might actually be what they go for, but it does appear to be something of a placeholder for characters who haven't been fully finalized visually yet. And there's things like the catching of fish. That's a thing in this game. Again, none of the fish have unique art for the specific designs. It's a generic fish symbol and the different names. And similarly with the trinkets that you get from offering gifts and nice presents to various characters. Right now, all of them are just visually denoted by a gold ring with a letter of the alphabet next to it, which isn't even like associated with that person. They're just like in order. So like all that is clearly placeholder that is going to be filled in later, but mechanically, everything that's in the game currently functions. There's just some stuff that like, okay, that's an asset that hasn't been finalized. That'll get updated later. There's a handful of those things, but not that many. This feels like a pretty finished product already, even as is. Impressively so, I would say. It did take me a little while to sort of make the mental shift into the slight different ways that this plays versus the first Hades, but that was not a difficult shift to make. And I'm enjoying it. And I want to talk a little bit more about the characters and the plot. And that will mean that we're now getting into what would be considered spoilers. So if you either haven't played it yet and are hoping to, or are waiting for the finished release to remain unspoiled, I will say that as it currently stands, the game is real good. It's already got a lot of polish, and I look forward to what new additions and finalized assets they put into the game. Cool. All right, so spoilery stuff. You play as Malinoe, who is sort of, well, I mean, she's not sort of. She is Zagreus' sister, but sort of secret sister who's been sort of kept away and has been raised by Hecate. Who like that's the kind of character I mean when I say like some slightly off to the side, not as commonly known. Because like when you think Greek gods, Zeus, Hermes, Hera, Poseidon, Ares, Aphrodite, duh. But here we're getting figures like Hecate and Nemesis, Eris, Moros. If you don't know who these people are, who these mythical figures are, the game will explain who they are to you. It does do that. So it's not like you need to know who these are. But it pulls a lot of less commonly known ones, which is nice. I just kind of like that in general. And from at least my understandings of most of these figures, they're pretty well represented. Hecate kind of takes the place of Hades in the original in a certain way, at least. She's not antagonistic in the way that Hades was in the original, but she is the one who, like, she's been training Malinoe to kill Kronos, the Titan of time and father of the main batch of gods, father of Hades and Zeus and Poseidon and those ones. And Kronos has taken over Hades' domain. He has taken over that entire thing, and he has captured the rest of Hades' family, which means Zagreus, the player character from the previous game, and Nyx and Hades and so forth. And in addition to that, he's currently leading an assault on Olympus. So that's the two different versions of Hades, the two Hades games that are in it. There's going down to try and reach Tartarus, as opposed to like the first game you started in Tartarus tried to go up. This time you're going down. And you are trying to go down, and it is via different routes, so they don't just recycle all of the areas. And you're trying to get down there to kill Kronos. And it doesn't quite work the same way narratively, because with Zagreus, like, yeah, he just dies, but he's already in the land of the dead, so he just goes back to the House of Hades. Here, the narrative is a bit more right as she is about to die. Melinwe basically just sort of casts a spell to go back to the crossroads where Hecate is. So going down to deal with Kronos is one of the two Hades ones that are in this. The other one is going up to the surface to try and help with the assault that's going on up there. And that unlocks a little bit later and has a whole bunch of other stuff going on with it, including the fact that it does address that it happened in the first game, that Zagreus and those born of the underworld can't stay on the surface. They can't. There's actually the first few times you go up there, you're basically on the clock, because every, I don't know how often it was, I'm going to say 10 seconds, you take a hit of damage, and then that, how much damage you hit goes up with each hit. So it's like, that hits you for 1 HP, and then 2, and then 3, 4, 5. So you're on the clock, and you're not going to last long, but there is a lot of more resource gathering in this one. There was a bit of resource gathering in the previous one. There was a lot more of it here, in a way that I could see it bugging some people, because there was a large variety of stuff. Because you can have a pickaxe to get things like silver or limestone or marble and whatnot. You can have a shovel to dig up patches of dirt and get seeds for stuff that you can plant at the crossroads, and get certain herbs and flowers that'll be spell components that help you unlock some of the permanent stuff as you open up more of the game. There's the fishing rod, so you can catch fish. And it can feel like a lot. It can feel overwhelming. I'm not finding it too bad, largely because, like Hades, the first one, because you're just going back so many times anyway, just changing out what a resource gathering tool you're using, and maybe having what resource do I need more of, determine whether you make a run on the surface or trying to get down to get to Kronos. Yeah, it's impacting you that way, but these are additional runs you're going to have to make regardless. So it feels a little bit more, it honestly doesn't feel that far off from a mechanic that is in this game as well, but was in the first one, where one of your various weapons would be like, oh, if you use this one, you'll get extra resources, which encourages you to use stuff that you might not otherwise use. Here, this kind of feels like the same thing to me, like what resources you are needing more of might determine what resource gathering tool you bring and whether you go top side or down. And it just feels like the same sort of nudging, like you can still do whatever you want, but like maybe try this. And for me, it works. I could see the resource gathering aspect expanding, bugging some players. But for me, it feels good. Narratively, I'm going to be really curious as to what. So I've beaten Kronos once at time of recording. I beat him with the skull for the record. If anyone's watching this is also playing it, and I'm going to be really curious narratively how they bring a satisfaction to that, because they had a very specific narrative in place to be able to have the first one come to a conclusion in a way that still allowed for you to continue to do runs into infinity while still reaching a conclusion of the Olympians sort of mending their fences and coming to a better sense of things, but you can still, do the run to try and get out, and actually you kind of need to maintain cover of the nature of the relationship, make it seem like you're being trapped down there, but no, you're not really. But that story came up with reasons for it to keep going. Here, the point is, like, we need to get rid of Kronos. Like, he's the Titan of Time, so like mechanically you can't justify that he can just roll back time, or at least for himself, so that he's just alive again and still has control of Hades. But that's harder to ever bring a satisfying conclusion to without actually ending the thing. And there might be an ending. I have noticed in my incantations, there is one that I have, some of the resources I have not seen at all yet for, so I don't know if some of these are locked behind either stuff I haven't reached in the game as it exists, or stuff that's going to be added on later updates. But there is definitely an incantation that says this will stop Kronos from reassembling himself. So that seems to be their solution, to basically just give the player the manual option to, when you're ready to have an ending, fire up this incantation once you have the resources. Okay. There's, I guess the other thing that I like, but or works, but I don't love, is the Arcana system, and this is for your upgrades. It's kind of their version of the I forget what it was, but like the mirror, where like you can alter how many death defiances you have, and damage output and speed and whatnot. The Arcana system, there are ways to kind of expand it and how many of these Arcana cards you can have, and you can also upgrade them, and like that's all well and good, except like I just kind of enjoy more straightforward upgrading of stuff. So the way the Arcana are designed is that you can't have everything active at the same time. You definitely don't have the resources initially, and there's even some of them that, by their nature, if the conditions are met for this one to be active, then other ones are not. So, and there's nothing wrong with that, except, I don't know, I kind of like becoming an overpowered badass and feeling like I've picked the wrong things. Like, fine, I'll swap it for something else. Is not as much fun for me, but that's a personal thing. There's certainly nothing wrong with that mechanic. But yeah, this is a good time, and I'm going to lose a lot of time to it. I'm not anticipating that I'm going to do an additional or refreshed review once the game is released as a full product, because I'm sure there will be more for me to experience and for me to enjoy. I don't think it'll be enough that is significantly different to a degree that it'll be worth me shooting a new review. But if there is, if like they do a wild twist with the story and makes me really go, ho, hang on, maybe I'll talk and more focus on the narrative. But at least as far as the mechanics go, I imagine they're going to mostly remain the same. So I don't think I'll be doing a follow-up. So if this is my only word on Hades 2, I like it. I liked the first one. I like this one. Hades 2, have you played it? What'd you think about it? Have you only played the first one? What'd you think about that? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Oh, one other random thing with the boons. They finally brought in Hera, which is like really cool. And a lot of her boons, like her duos with Zeus, involve negating any Zeus boons you have in order to power up the Hera boons, or vice versa. And given the nature of their marriage, yeah, that totally tracks. But anyways, Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. I've been playing this on Twitch. So link to my Twitch stream in addition to the Patreon link and other stuff. That's all down in the description. Don't worry too much about it though. We take relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. Now to give my thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B., Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Jean Foray, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabi Likes the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, White Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toka Blahuvian, Pau Barabajagal, and Mara G. Thank you so much for your support. If you can get your name said, maybe even correctly, in the Patreon support tiers. Also, it helps me feed these little buggers.